morning, Stocktwits Nation. It is Wednesday, April 23rd. As you can see, Shai Balor is not here today. He's actually on his way to New York for the Hashtag Awards next week, which you could still buy tickets for. But I'm here with Howard Lindzon, CEO of Stocktwits, and special guest Dorrian Porter, who is building a very cool, I want to say, Internet of Things company. So we're gonna do, guys. First of all, how's it going, Dorrian? Where are you calling in from?
Good to see you. I'm Palo Alto.
Nice. Okay, Howard, where in the world are you?
I'm pantless in Phoenix.
Nice. I feel like a lot of people in Phoenix are that way. I don't know why. I just get the Arizona's a little different.
94 degrees in the morning. You gotta stage into everything.
All right. Well, we have some nice weather for you.
I know it's gonna be in the 70s. I'm on my way to New York today. I'm gonna meet Michael Saylor tomorrow.
Oh, what?
Yeah. I think
Well-
you're welcome to come in. It's at, well, I can't say it live here, but I'm speaking with Michael at the Bitwise.
I was gonna
conference.
ask what you guys were gonna talk about, but I think I know.
I think I'm gonna
Probably
I'm gonna
Bitcoin.
try, and there is this rare Chinese hypnosis method, and my goal is to get his password.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Let us.
Dorrian, you know this. We're both Canadian. We've studied Chinese hypnosis.
Yeah, that was my undergrad. I did that for undergrad.
Two Canadians. All right. Loving it. Dorrian, first of all, I was going to describe VestaBoard, but I'll let you do it because I don't want to botch it. Tell us a little bit about yourself and VestaBoard, and then we're going to get into some headlines, guys, but really why Dorrian's here is he's kind of on the front lines of these tariff impacts as a CEO. So we're going to hear firsthand about what that's like.
Yeah, so I mean, we're a hardware company. We have this messaging display called VestaBoard. It's not a digital display. It's a piece of hardware that has over 14,000 parts. So just like those old train departure boards you might see in Paris, and that gave me the idea back in 2012 in Paris when I saw one of those. I thought about sending messages back to my kids at home using this device, and that kind of popped into my head of creating a consumer version, a business version that could be used. And so we've been at it now almost full 10 years, which is hard to believe, but have been shipping the product for 4.5 years, 5 years, and sold about 15,000 of them. It is a pricey product. We can talk a little bit about today about some product plans we have as well that got disrupted with the old tariffs as well this year.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Howard. I'll chime in quickly. Social leverage, our firm does not invest generally in hardware. And when we met through, who did we meet through?
We met in an elevator, Howard, one day. I was carrying a mock-up.
Oh, meet
I was carrying a mock-up of the product. I had literally like a piece of foam in my hand.
I think I was with my wife, maybe.
You were with your wife, and we got in the same elevator.
Wow. We got in the same elevator.
You transferred me cash on the spot using your mobile device in like 2019.
This is like a rom-com. I like it.
The world was a different, friendly place.
Yeah.
But it wasn't 2019. It was much earlier.
Pre-COVID. You were like, let's get into hardware 1 year before COVID.
I was flush with dineros. And it was back in the days when money really was flying around like that. Not big. And so I invested a small amount of personal capital. You can see from the art behind me, this is the first painting my wife and I ever bought together, called Love Letters, in Amsterdam. And I had to throw out the dogs playing poker piece that I bought in Amsterdam an hour earlier for $7. But I met Dorrian in the elevator, and I'm like, get the pitch. And this is a true story in San Francisco.
Elevator
I did get that. And I'm like, oh, fuck that. Who doesn't like train stations in Europe, right? And Dorrian's an incredible entrepreneur. And really this product, so I hate to chime in, you never thought, even though you thought about made in China, there was no choice. Of course this was going to be made in China. You know what I'm saying? If you said this was going to be made in the United States, I would have wired the money back to myself. So that's kind of the background of this. When you see the mechanical parts, right? Only China could do this, right? So go ahead.
Well, Howard, only electronics in China too. Regardless of what we talk about today and the impact now, as we talk about plans to have more diversity in production and diversify away from China, we're still going to be importing a lot of electronics from China and a lot
Yeah.
of parts, metals. So there's such a coupling to China for the next decade when it comes to these kind of products, electronics generally.
And I
That's
want to set the
a
stage,
reality.
Katie. So it's just Stocktwits doesn't think this deeply per se. Obviously, everybody on Stocktwits has a business or works for somebody, but as the world was me, but generally the world was looking at the VIX and talking about macro and not putting faces to names. You know, you're just trading the market and what's Besant going to say and what's Navarro going to say and what's Trump thinking. There's companies, and again, there's been many podcasts, probably across media about talking to mom and pops and larger businesses, but Dorrian and I have been chatting behind the scene, and it's like, how do you give advice into a situation? Dorrian's got a lot of good investors, but how do you give advice into one day the tariffs are 20, the next day they're 145, and then he's going to double again? And how do you report to your shareholders? And like, what are your shareholders supposed to explain? Because we're watching this all live too. And and during this whole time, and we're still in it, the VIX hit 60. So as an investor, it's like, hey, Dorrian, can you hold on a minute? I got to put on a trade and buy some stocks. But it doesn't matter if VIX 60 drops to VIX 20. The problem hasn't disappeared for everybody that's doing business in China. As we wake up this morning, there's maybe fun to have made some profits, or you feel like you need it because you sold. But in the end of the time, there's still businesses with 1 million to 100 million to a billion in sales that have no clarity. So Dorrian, what does that feel like?
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned Besant. You guys can think about the Treasury Secretary because you love the public markets. I never thought I'd have to think about the Treasury Secretary so much.
Yeah.
So it was like, I mean, everyone saw this coming the last couple of years, right? Even I have friends who say, "What are you making in China for?" And even if they're in hardware, they're like, "We're moving to Vietnam. We're moving
Oh.
here." So the writing was on the wall, just on macro trends. Biden kept some of the tariffs that Trump put in the last time with China. I think
So you
for
were
us
aware, obviously.
Yeah, so starting October, we actually started to look at production changes and finding potentially partners that could diversify a little bit. So that was starting, and then but we're a startup, so it's not like easy to just say, oh, this is what we'll do. We'll just go here and go here. We're trying to manage everything about the business, growing sales, cash, all of that stuff. So but it was starting, and then January inauguration, within a few days, I think the 10% came in, and it was like, okay, things are starting to get real. And then I was thinking about it. It's like, okay, you knew you were the frog in the pot. You just didn't expect within a couple months, the boiling water would get like dumped on you as opposed to like creeping up. So, so it went 10%, then another 10%. So, and that second 10% was a killer because, and I was thinking about the fairness of this coming in. Like, we had product on the water before that 10% was imposed. And usually they do give you a window where it's like goods on the one side may not get tariffed as long as they left. But for that reason, that second 10% was like a really short window. So we already had goods on the water. Tariff came in 5 days or 7 days later. The goods arrived. We missed the tariff deadline by 1 day and had to write a check for 40 grand just to the government for goods that were already on the water coming our way. So that was pretty significant. So then you're hoping, okay, how do I plan this business around 20%? And as Howard says, it goes to, start at 55% more for China, and within 5 days it was 145%. So, it was getting boiling water poured on us. Just, it feels like a year ago, but it was less than 3 weeks ago.
I have a quick follow-up, Dorrian, because it seems like obviously the writing was on the wall, but I hear some conversation that people say they never thought he would do it or do it to this extent. So I'm curious, like, are you an outlier in being like, yeah, I kind of knew this was coming, or you just generally knew the sentiment was going to shift this direction? Like when people were saying, why aren't you moving your operations? Was it because some people thought, like, saw this coming in this way?
I think there's the general macroeconomic, geopolitical situation that does seem, that everyone knows is there. I mean, I hope it doesn't come to life like people think it is. If we don't win AI and China does, we're dead. Those kind of comments. I mean, hopefully we're talking about peace along the way the next 10 years too. Um, and so, that trend, I think most people are very aware of, and that started some of the diversification, including for Apple and others, going to India, et cetera. So I think there's that big trend that isn't a secret and has been going on. I think specifically when it came to this, I think for the whole market, including Apple, the 145% electronics tariff was just untenable. So that was, I think, a shock to everyone. And of course, I think a week later, it's hard to keep track, they made the exemption on the electronics on the Friday. And I've got a buddy, CEO of a public company that makes hardware. So I texted him at 6 a.m. and texted him this exemption or whatever time it came out. And then by Sunday, they were on TV saying it's not really an exemption.
Yeah.
We're now going to look at it for a month. So, yeah, I'm sure Howard got a note that day from me, or maybe the next day, that just said, we're looking at every aspect of our business, and so we went 10 days of just like, what do we do? It was, at that point, it's like, well, we have to assume we're moving out of China, because that's not, you just can't make it. The sad part is the messaging of, well, just come to America, was just not real. As Howard said, it would cost us, we sell the price, expensive product, we sell it now for 34, we raised the price 10% or 8% beginning of this year, or the second tariff, February, and we charged $34.99. We couldn't make it here for $34.99. Like, even with the 145% tariff, it doesn't, we'd have to sell this product for, we'd still probably make it cheaper. It's just we couldn't sell it for what we sell it for. So that disconnect of like, well, just make it here and it'll all be good, is real. And if you do hear about people making things, whether it's in the US or maybe even Mexico or Canada, there's a lot of parts coming in from China anyway. So the transformation aspect isn't always like a really amazing transformation. It truly is just assembly and ship. So, that the last 2 weeks have just been like, what do we do? It forced some real sharp thinking. So that probably is helpful. And that's, we had a product actually that we've been planning to launch this year, and there was probably already some execution unease about it, and it really made us focus on like, what are we doing this year?
Yeah. I know I think you had a question, Howard, on just planning it in particular. And then I have so many questions about just like the how. Like, you just call up the factory and you're like, sorry. But anyway, let's go like bigger picture, talk about planning generally. Howard, I'll let you chime in there. And then I have some specifics. And also, if you're in the chat and this is impacting your business, definitely let us know. We'd love to talk to about it and bring you guys into the conversation.
Yeah, the idea here is to just let people hear from like, what is a startup, what isn't, the business. Mm-hmm. Just when you're dealing with these type of problems, you're not investing for 1 year. You've got partners, right? Just like America has trading partners. You can't just unplug. I call it the Kerplunk economy, right? Like, where I'm trying to simplify things, because in the end, I'm not running billions of dollars. I'm just trying to be a hobbyist. And at Stocktwits, we got, 1 million people that want to kind of digest all this stuff. So, I call it kind of the Kerplunk economy, because every little product, whether you're just software or whether you're hardware and software like Dorrian, has this intricacies. And if you pull this is a little child's game, if you pull out Kerplunk and all the marbles fall down, are you the winner? No. The idea is to have a few marbles in front of you. So you have to be very careful when you take something out, especially in an intertwined system. But in a two-dimensional board game, it's quite simple. Like, don't pull everything out at once, and things will break if you do. Mm-hmm. So it's very Trump. Like, whether you're supposed to listen to him or not, these were major outbursts of like trade policy. And so I just want to get people to have that. So while we're yelling on Twitter or Stocktwits or like hypothesizing, here's a real business with say 100 employees and factories in China and stuff on the water, and what do you do about price, and how do you change? So from a macro picture, what is those first, how do you keep the team going, and like, North Star, I think you had some other ideas about a lower price product that we argued about. Well, not argued about, but like bantered back and forth about is this the right ideas. So as a CEO of that, tell me how you kind of think this plays out.
Well, for me, I think first of all, I was wondering how many people know what Kerplunk is. I do remember Kerplunk, but there can't be
It's
like
easy to
a
look
huge
up, and
amount of
when you
people.
see the game, because it's
Oh, when you
two-dimensional,
see
you
it, you
go,
get
oh
it.
yeah,
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
see.
Howard's a genius. He's a metaphorical genius when he
Yeah.
mentions Kerplunk. But I don't know. There's one line that I liked that I wrote to investors, which was like eliminating uncontrollable risks. That was, and actually Kerplunk's a game full of probably uncontrollable risks. So,
It is, because you don't know. But the idea as a kid's game was, even as a kid, these games were so great because he was so strategically like who
I
started.
love that
You
game.
could tell when the next one was going to cause damage, so the game would,
Uh-huh.
And the idea was, okay, you lose, but the whole idea wasn't to pull them all out at once, stand over your partners and go,
Definitely.
I have the most marbles, I win. No, you lose if you have the most marbles.
Right.
And it felt
Yeah.
like Trump was just playing the game the opposite way. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, but startups, of course, you do like taking risks, right? Like that's the whole point. You're really going for it. And so when you're really going for it, and then this hits you, you're just like, okay, what can we do? So for me this year, it was like, well, the last 2 weeks was planning for this year that says, you know, we still have to make in China in some form. We got a little fortunate because we are really investigating our production, and so we're lining up some situations that actually reduced inventory for this quarter. It was just pure timing from a process that started last fall through to now, and so we got a little bit lucky. But thinking about the rest of the year, it was like just take away everything that we can control for a risk perspective. So we were going to launch a new product that was much different than our current product. Same ideas of what's involved, IoT, some of the flapping, but it was going to totally change our business. We were going to have to introduce new production line that was totally different than our current one. We were going to, with this product, funny enough, it would affect our marketing, it would affect our operations, our logistics, and so that was, looking at that, saying we're about to go on this new adventure was like really scary because it was just too big, as Howard says. It was like marbles. There was already going to be all these marbles, and now there's all these other marbles dumped in.
Right.
And so that over the last 10 days caused us to think about it. And then on top of that, by the way, as part of the response, China put some restrictions on magnets. And I immediately looked up the type of magnets our new product was using, and it was the magnets that are covered by the restrictions. So that was like
Why
a hammer.
magnets?
Well, probably for the auto industry mostly,
Ah.
but it's the underlying ways that magnets are created. So it probably, everyone thinks China puts a restriction in and it's untouchable. We probably could have worked with our factory to get an export license, an exemption, whatever. But when you're reading that and you're in the middle of this storm, you're just like, whoa, like what's going on?
Yeah.
And so for us, for the last 10 days, it was like, what could we possibly do that would, if we eliminate that, which is a controllable risk, but a big part of our plan this year, what could we do? And it forced some real sharp thinking. And as Howard said, he and I debated a couple of ideas. But we are probably going to release something, but it's in line with what we already produce. It won't change our marketing much. We're essentially going to introduce a smaller version of what we do, very short order. And we're excited about it, but it's happening in 2-3 weeks, and now we got to think about the planning. Like there's still risk, obviously, but it's just risk that I can't do anything about.
Yeah.
And you do have to think like, well, let's hope that 145% doesn't come back, because that's a whole different
I
ballgame.
mean, I think he said, it was really, when he speaks economics, no jokes, it's really hard to decipher. It sounds like
He's
Who's
talking
he?
about Trump, I think. Just to be clear, he's talking about Trump.
I
not
was
me,
gonna
unless
say,
he's
wow,
talking-
Oh,
Howard.
sorry.
Way to treat the
No,
guest.
I was reading it's hard to watch him. So I was not you, Dorian. It's hard to watch Trump. So one of my friends, there's so many smart people that I've been reading, right? But when I was reading the actual commentary from Trump last night, whew, I mean, the one thing he did said is, that we're not going to do 140. We're going to go low. We're going to go low. Again, we
0
don't
to
know what-
145 is a hell of a range, and
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Well,
Okay.
there's a bunch still with 145, right? So
Yeah.
electronics got exempted, but there's still a bunch of stuff on 145.
I don't think he's moved, but yeah, I think So basically, yeah, Dorian, I guess you're just not out of the woods. I think for people watching that, and then I think the other most interesting thing is in our industry, in the tech industry, there's levels of pull, right? And I think when Dorian and I were chatting about this a couple days ago, or 3, 4 days ago, I felt bad because I'm like, well, who am I going to call? Like, the All In podcast, a lot of tech people listen to it, and supposedly they were bragging about, they have a direct line to the president. And listen, I mean, there's an argument that said that was a smart move, but the whole point of our system is that you're not supposed to have, four people aren't supposed to have back doors to the
Mm-hmm.
president. And I think when we watch the inauguration, um, there's this kind of like, God damn, the Mag 7 CEOs are sitting down with the president, and then you realize why they have to, but
Yeah.
then you realize that didn't even help them.
I was say, Shy and
Or,
I were talking this week. These antitrust, Meta's in court with the FTC, Google. It's like
Google.
they got to be like, we just cut you a check. That was a $250 million inaugural fund, record breaking. $1 million is nothing to them. But you got to think there was some of that was like, hey, like go easy. And those cases are going. Google just lost.
and I think, so what does it feel like to a small business is like, who am I going to call? And I'm
Yeah.
not saying people should have a who am I going to call, but I think when we're in America and if you want people to start innovative businesses, and Dorian and VestaBoard is innovative, right? It brings great joy. It's a communication product. It's a piece of art. It's doing no harm. Um, and I'm saying that's business. Sometimes you get smacked in the head, but it just feels like the system is not working.
And
And
this is one story of
this is just one
millions.
story, and that's why I thought it
Yeah.
was super interesting because there's some funds that probably do all of this in China, right? And there's some businesses that don't have anything else going for them, and they didn't do anything wrong per se. And I guess you can always argue, what, you didn't think Trump was going to do that? Of course, again, there's, but some businesses just can't move. The way China and electronics work is you just not going to get the scale. And well, Dorian can explain this, but
Yeah.
it takes time.
The
That's
suppliers,
what
our PCB on our back has 54 different suppliers of electronic parts. Where do you think all 54 of those are making their parts? They're making them in China. So,
Right.
the
It's
idea
not
of
just
just,
one thing coming from China, it's
yeah,
multiple. I guess my question for you, Dorian, because it came up on the Levi earnings call, and the CEO was saying, yeah, we can move. It's gonna take a bit. Either reshoring, like we don't even have the manufacturing capacity for some of these industries. But what is like if you I guess the first question is, are you moving out of China elsewhere if you can speak to it? And then the second is, how long does that take? Because that doesn't sound like a phone call switch over, right? There's like
yeah, yeah.
retooling, there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's a couple of big issues. First of all, glad we brought my son into it. He worked at Levi's last summer, so he'll be thrilled we're mentioning that company in the retail store in
Amazing.
Stanford Mall.
Love
And
it.
then on, and then on the manufacturing is probably like so if it stays at 20, so it's at 20 right now with the fentanyl tariffs. Doesn't make sense to move. So even to a different country, let alone the United States, but to a different country, because what you add is longer lead times and transportation cost of all your sub supplies.
Yeah.
So you're going to be moving supplies out of China to your other factory, whether that's Mexico or Indonesia or Vietnam. And so that switch is just time delay and obviously getting it set up. Now you can run your line and set up, as you go, but of course that costs more. But it's really that impact. And then imagine that particular country, runs afoul of something, and then you get into that trouble. So the idea of moving is definitely not easy. And then, I think for some products, I mean, maybe if you're making jeans and you've got a few inputs, you figure that out. When you're making electronics, this idea of just bring it to Mexico or bring it to Vietnam or whatever. A lot of people did go to Vietnam, and you'll continue to see that develop. Samsung, is making in Vietnam. Large companies are making in Vietnam. But that, for a small company, it doesn't feel easy. And so one of the other things you plan for is tariff scenarios. So what if it goes to 50? What if it does this? What if then you got to start looking at international markets that start to look attractive. The reason the smaller product and potentially, much more affordable product is interesting to us too is not just for the U.S. market, but now, maybe we sell better in Europe. Because our current product's pretty high end, looks really great in a beautiful Phoenix home like Howard's, but European homes are different and they're not used to spending maybe 3K on electronics for their wall. So as we think about other products, we're also now thinking international markets and trying to think through, where can we enter tariff free and build the business.
Yeah.
And I would say, listen, Elon's out saying, Optimus, this is a guy he can call the president, right? Well, not call him, and they're sitting around playing Kerplunk, but he has to say, so they're literally talking. And then Elon has to report to his shareholders that, China's rare earth restrictions mean that Optimus can't get their part. So it makes no sense in that they're literally chatting and Elon was in buddy summer camp with Elon. And so I just think, listen, the shame about Trump is he has enough power and balls and whatever you call this, or gumption or instinct to tear everything apart. But then you go 1 inch deep and you go, what the hell's going on over there? And you stack all these things up over and over again and just have to question, what are we doing? But
I had one thought, Howard, just that was so funny with these tariffs is because the messaging was reshore here, right? That's what they said. Hey, doesn't matter, come to America. But what they did also with these electronics and probably everything else is they made it impossible to build a factory here. Because even for us to build factories, we need all the things that they tariffed. So that was to me a great irony of just reshore your manufacturing. Sure, where do I start to buy my metals and my electronics and all that? Well, guess where you buy it? Because the only ones who are making it are in China. So this idea of reshoring America is great, but it's a 10-year plan. It's not a 45-day plan.
There's other pieces of
and
that
there should
too.
be a Slack channel that the government sets up for every founder that says, or a signal chat that says, hey, listen, backdoor. I mean, it's one signal chat over from Pete Hegseth's launch channel. For businesses, between 5 and 100 million that are affected by China, here's a chat room with our expert that gives you a backdoor to do this, and here's some subsidies in the meantime. So again, I refuse to give any of these politicians the benefit of the doubt, let alone Trump, because it's not the first term. So again, I can only view this as a child's two-dimensional game, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the results and the panic speak for how he behaved and how he did this. And he wore Elon out. So, testament to Dorrian and these small investors or small companies, he wore Elon out. Elon's leaving Doji, whether we like it or not. And Trump won again. Elon took a lot of flack for whatever his intentions were. Trump won again. He's still on True Social. True Social's slowly building a business plan, right? And Trump, I mean, how many daggers did Elon take on, self-inflicted, whatever? How many daggers? If you listen to the conference call or recently any of Elon's discussions, he's ready to break down.
Yeah, you know what though? He's still
Trump looks
the
fresh as a
wealthiest,
fucking 6-year-old.
There's a lot of sympathy for Elon. It's yeah, I get it, sucks, but it's chose that path. Also, still selling a lot of EVs, even though we could get into
sympathy. I'm just saying he beat Elon. Trump beat Elon.
I feel like at the end, Elon's hey, I have a lot of theory, but Elon, I think he's gonna be fine. I mean, he's all in on this robotics thing now. We had the earnings yesterday that went over that, but I think that relationship fell apart for many reasons, but I don't know if Trump won. Elon's just going to go back to doing what he's doing.
Oh, I didn't mean that. I mean when you go toe to toe with Trump in a room, right? Trump, it's not about winning. It's to us, of course, Elon in his own mind one, and he's got 6 new baby mamas, and he's got his Optimus robot. Meanwhile, he's talking about I don't know how many million robots in
Yeah.
2030, and there's still people from 2017 that haven't gotten their cars. So
Yeah.
the carnival grift, shell game of Elon goes on because people love his product. If no one loved the Tesla, it wouldn't matter, right? So
Yeah.
people love the Tesla. If no one, ooh, the market's open.
The market is open.
If no one loved the thing about VestaBoard, if no one loved it, we wouldn't be here discussing it.
Yeah.
People love the VestaBoard. Like they said, they're paying up to $4,000 retail for a piece of art that's also a piece of communication equipment. That's a throwback to the Make America Great Again train era. So people love the product, and that's always the bummer, right? And that's why, if a product's not going to work, doesn't matter if you make it in China or the United States. I think the haphazard way this is rolled out, right? And so, anyways, we're rooting for you, Dorian.
Yeah.
Like, it's a good
I have
story.
like one question. I know I got to let you guys go. So Dorian, I guess being on the front like lines of this and seeing like shifts you're going to have to make, are there opportunities for investors? So like what are there any winners? Like is there a company that like is in charge of like relocating factories, or like when you look at this, or like is anyone making money right now asymmetrically because of what's going on that you see?
Not that I see, but I am so focused right now on our
Yeah,
business.
you're like, I'm more on my
and,
own.
and
Okay.
I'm focused, not seeing the opportunities that way.
Yeah.
And so I wish I could answer that question. You probably asked me the toughest question you could ask, but there
Yeah,
must
no, I
be
was just
something
interested.
out
Like,
there.
there's always, someone randomly has some process or
Yeah,
product,
the
and just
custom
like
brokers. The custom brokers are making more
maybe
money.
lawyers. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Howard, any final words? Also, you're on not as much on the front lines of the physical product, but it's interesting. Shy and I are like wargaming on this show all the time, thinking, like, oh, they're probably thinking this, and so it's great to hear like firsthand.
Well, I don't try. Like I said, I think when I was writing about it last week, you can't. It's very hard to trade, and when you really understand who you're trading against, and then you throw in, tweets from the White House. Only a fool or the very best can trade. But there's certain times in the market where my antenna go up, and for the last 2 weeks when the VIX was rising above 30, I'm in the game, right? It's like overtime in a hockey for an athlete, or there's certain times where you have to suit up, right? And by suit up, I mean go into your routine. The phone's going to ring more, but you also have your family and your money, and then you got your clients' money. You have to do your job, right? And it's silly, but as the VIX goes up, your attention needs to go up. Why? Because at the very highest level, volatility expansion means new trends are going to emerge, right? We don't know when the volatility will drop, but historically, as the volatility gets above 20, 30, 40, doesn't do it that often above 40, and we're talking about 4% intraday, everyday moves, guess what? Even if it's caused by one person, and I have called this the dumbest bear market of all time, trends will change. As you kerplunk, as you pull things out, like the old operator telephone things, and put it in another hole, new trends will change. And so you have to pay attention and watch the markets to see what it is. What do we have so far, right? Dorrian is still in almost the exact same position. There's some hope that things settle at 20%. Dorrian and VestaBoard believe that at 20%, okay, not fun. I can be mad, but we got business to do, and we're going to innovate, and hopefully there's a long-term deal, and we can build a business with higher 20% tariffs. Our world is, okay, what other companies do we have that are bleeding? Can I help them? We have 100-something companies in the portfolio, 2 Manscaped and some clothing companies. There's so much been torn apart here, so we'll see where the chips will lie. But you can now go look at the markets and go, okay, gold, whether we like it or not, that has continued higher, right? Bitcoin, when they announced this, which is a variation at some levels of gold, right? Much higher. And this morning, we'll start to see breakouts, right? We'll start to see stocks that don't have ties to China that as much, that were doing well throughout this whole thing, probably start to break out because, calm markets are better markets. People will spend money. I mean, look at Facebook. China pulled their ad spending probably, right? So everybody's connected and there were problems everywhere. But what eventually the VIX will settle down. Is it going to be 2 months? Is it going to be 3 months? And you don't have to watch the news and be tied into every percent statement. And what I try and teach investors is when the VIX gets up here, start looking, start really understanding, start preparing yourself for the time, could be 6 months out or 3 years out, where the VIX is back below 15. And then remember what it felt like when the VIX was 60, right? And treat yourself to some sales and some profits when the VIX is 15, because it's only going to stay there, especially, in a world that's this intertwined. It's not going to stay at 15 forever. And if you have that kind of understand, very simple understanding of the market, but it's still very complex because the VIX and volatility are tied to major changes in the market. Will that help you as a startup? Absolutely not. If you are building a startup, do not care about where the VIX is. Obviously, you have to understand a lot of other things. The VIX means nothing, okay? If you can get investor money and you have a great idea, VIX 60 is a good time to start a business, and VIX 10 is a good time to start a business. But if you are investing other people's money and you are taking after the family nest egg, you should be really excited when the VIX is at 60. Turn off the headlines, especially if you live in America, and start focusing on what could work.
Yeah. Really, I'm glad you ended there, Howard, because kind of bringing that link between the Main Street, Wall Street, SMB, big company. Dorrian, Howard, thank you so much. Guys, stick around. I'm going to do a quick lightning round of news, but I'll let you guys go. Dorrian, you'll have to check back. Good luck with everything. And Howard, we'll see you. We'll see you in New York next week.
Yep.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. So now I'm going to shift over while these
You want me
guys
to hang on,
talk.
or you want me to take off?
It's up to you. Do you want to stay? And you want to stay?
Yeah, I'll listen in.
Oh, you don't want to? Well, you can't just stay and listen. You got to talk.
Comment. You hit me up.
All right, I got you. Okay. So we had a array of headlines, which we touched on some of those in that conversation just now. Pre-market checking in there, surging last night into today as Trump walked back some of his criticisms of Powell. He was asked outright if he was trying to get rid of Powell, and he said no. He had no intention. Interesting wording. This goes kind of the whiplash that you were alluding to. It feels like in a reality show when they're like in the confessional, kind of looks like this. And they're like, I hate that person. And then they get in the kitchen and they're like, hi, oh my God. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's interesting because I forgot who said it, but someone's like, it might've been Joe Wiesenthal, but it was like, all you got to do is just listen to what he's saying because he's like tweeting it and then he's doing it, but it's changing. Like, did you think he just said that because he knew the market was going to, like, okay, relief, and the no intention thing kind of hedges, right? Because he could have intentions later.
Again, this is you can call it 5D chess or Kerplunk. There's only two dimensions, right? There's not five, there's not four. There's flat board, which is how we grew up. There was no internet, there was no, AI when I was a kid, and so all games were played on a board level. That's how Trump grew up too. I believe he's playing 2D chess, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just don't lie to yourself and believe there's some bigger game. So unless you have inside information of when he's going to tweet, you have to rely on other factors. Everything else is just bullshit. And so I try and dumb it down to, like Joe says, gotta take what he says seriously. I mean, that's the way.
Even if it's in all caps,
you have to take it in a two-dimensional way. Yeah. I don't believe any of the other stuff, and therefore I was only going off the VIX 60. And for me, VIX 60 means yes, we could implode, but he feels that tension too. Professional people in the industry also know that VIX 60 is, you got to fucking deal with this, right?
A wave of sentiment surveys came out too last couple days. I think he's responding to that. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, this is someone who does care what people think about him.
Of course, he wants
And
everybody to love him,
yeah,
and
so
he's going about it like Herman Munster, um, and another
I
TV
got
character.
that one, by the way.
Well, because that's who he grew up with,
Yeah.
Does he want to
No, I know.
be?
I have a pair of slippers that are like chunky, and my mom calls them the Herman Munster shoes.
Yeah, is he
Does he
Uncle
get those?
Fester or is he Herman Munster? But
Yeah.
the point is, he does at some sick level want to be like. That's the WWF in him, like it's a show.
Yeah.
Okay. But you know what? You have to grow up.
Yeah.
And WWF is fake.
Yeah.
And so Joe, I don't read Joe all the time, but during this crisis, I was following Joe again because, first of all, he knows global macro. And second of all, he talks to very smart people that I wouldn't talk to. And so I'm trying to get a concentric circle of people that I don't have to listen to all the time. But when the VIX gets above 40, I'm like changing who I follow because, you've got to switch things up and see what the other people are saying. But I guess you could predict that he would cave, whatever the word we're going to call it. But at the same time, anybody would cave. Any normal person seeing what the world was reacting to these type of policies, right, would change.
Yeah. I wanna jump to one other thing that it came out last night, and as a CEO, I want to get your read on this. I don't know if you saw this. Historic layoffs. Bloomberg reporting historic layoffs coming to Intel. So they got earnings this week. They're reportedly planning to lay off over 21,000 people. 20% of its workforce. I looked into this just to see context. It would be one of the most significant, both by percentage reduction as well as total headcount. And I want to ask you about this phenomenon of the contagion effect of, do other companies see this now? And just backing up real quick, Intel has a new CEO, Lip Bhutan. He's a super impressive guy. He just got there though. Like literally, like this is like a month in. He's like, oh, nope. So like as a CEO, like, do you think other CEOs look at this and they're like, oh, if he can do it? And I'll add one thing here before you jump in, Howard, is it sounds like it's a lot of middle management, which sounds like an AI thing.
Well, I think, listen, I came back as CEO myself a year ago, and I think when most people step back in as CEO, you cut between 20 and 50%. Why are you back? You're usually in there for inefficiencies that came before you or new technologies that change everything. So yes, combo of both, obvious, good call. I think the problem with Intel is just what they represent. The new Intel Inside, well, there is no such thing anymore. When you think of Intel Inside, that goes to playing Kerplunk, right? That's like a 1990s, jingle. And if you think of Intel Inside today, you're thinking NVIDIA. And if you think of tech today, you're thinking of humanoids, right? Or self-driving. And so, in tech, you got to have a brand now, right? And it's like Nike. It's not like the product's not important. Intel has important products, but kids have moved on from Nike, right? They're trading them online. There's just 1,000 brands that kids can associate themselves with. So technology is a much like fashion in that sense. Like you got to assume the competition is moving at speed of light. And, Intel has just missed for so long, right? Whether it was AMD and now it's ARM and now it's NVIDIA and Dell. There's just so much competition. And so probably it's the right thing to do is to focus, right? And
he
sneak
did
attack.
he alluded wanting to get back to that engineering culture, what you called
Yeah.
out. They used to be known for that. It sounds like they got a lot of fat to trim in the middle layers. But do you like believe there's something to that contagion effect? Because statistically, it does. There's evidence. Like this happens once, and then it's like boom, boom, boom. Other people are like, oh, cool. They see how the market reacts. Do you think that's a thing? That's a real thing as a CEO. You look over there and you're like, oh, they got rid of 20,000 people. I could get rid of 5,000.
Yeah, I've never had the privilege of working at I did, work at some big companies, but not something of that size. So I think they're in the heart of a storm of change, right? And they're up against Jensen Huang, and they're up against the competitors, and they're up against China, Hawaii, and so I think, and then you have a new CEO, right? So now you got to rally. The morale must be awful, right? Everybody's option. You got the brain drain from the options not working, so the good people probably have left, right? The
Mm-hmm.
good. It's kind of like Yahoo and media, right? Like you can survive, but how do you now become relevant again? So I think the strategy is yes, fold in, do the one thing that you're doing well, and eventually it's going to take time, but you're going to have to execute for a few years, and then Wall Street will start trusting you, and then investors that are willing to take a shot because the CEO is a good storyteller, hopefully, and can explain the story and get some investors that aren't growth investors to you got to change over that shareholder base to get investors that will take enough time to listen to that story, um, to believe and hold on for a couple of years to catch those early gains if they do indeed execute. So not a job that any normal
Yeah.
person would want.
Something to watch for sure. We're also, as we wrap up here, watching the markets. The Dow is rallying 900 points. So that's Powell. The Powell comments walked back for now. Basent saying that the current where they're at with China right now is unsustainable. So giving some positivity there. Tesla surging after their earnings, after Elon alluded that he was stepping back a bit from government, even though they took massive revenue and sales hits as was expected. We also got earnings today from Boeing. They beat expectations. So commercial jet deliveries soared. They locked in a $10 billion deal to sell off parts. That stock is rising, and SAP also reporting. And of course, we've got tomorrow Google coming up and reporting. So there's a lot going on, guys. We'll be right back here tomorrow to cover all the news. Howard, it was great to see you. I know I'll see you very soon.
I was going to add a couple things.
Okay.
Is to watch the rates, right? Like, Trump does watch. If he's going to see these results, they're cooking up a story, right? It's frustrating to know that some people knew what was going to happen here, but there's some people that just made bets as well.
Some people are getting so rich.
Those people were already rich.
I know, but like so much. It's annoying.
Yeah. But as a small investor, you just got to get over it.
Yeah.
Markets are rigged, but most important thing in here is signal. What has Besant been saying? And what has Powell been saying? They would love to lower rates, right? And with the lower dollar, right, as haphazard as this was, that's a good thing. And when the dollar moves that quickly, not a good thing. There were blow-ups, right? Big $60 moves like that, that's where you get blow-ups. But those blow-ups are now known, and the cleanup is underway in the hedge fund world and in the money world. In the real world, rates right now are settling down. The dollar's at a much lower level. If we're not going to have a massive trade war, which we shouldn't, we should definitely do the right things for America. But if we're not going to have a trade war, they can lower rates as early as next month, right? And what happens when you lower rates? People that are on the sidelines can change their house, can do the work. If people know that they don't have to wait a year to get parts from Home Depot or China, they can start construction, right? No one wants to wait a year, right? So that puts to do the renovations to their home. But if they know there's 90 days, they'll start their projects. People like Dorrian, who we just had on the show, doesn't have to fire 10 people, but can get back to doing work. So it's productive.
I do think they need to lay a foundation of like a do to say ratio and stability, because if they keep kind of going this back and forth, then to your point, normally, that might trigger, but now people might be conditioned to say, well, I don't know, what's it going to be in a month? And that's where you get the paralysis. So I feel like they almost have to lay a ground, like they have to have some evidence of like, okay, we're saying this, we're doing this is happening next.
Yeah. So for a guy like Dorrian who just came on the show, he's still in hopium mode, right? That he could live with 20, right? If we keep going back, like in 2 days from now, while it may not affect the markets if Trump says 40, Dorrian's got a whole new set of problems.
Yeah.
Right. So again, this is real. That's why I want to have him on. It's like he's in the heat of this. He can live with 20. He has no one to tell that other than us.
Yeah.
And if he can only live with 20, you know, we're stretched, right? Like that's probably the number. And so
Yeah.
anything above 20 is going to shut down a lot of companies,
Yeah.
right? And so there's got to be some discussions hopefully going on and saying, listen, and then if you're playing 5D chess, let's give them credit and say they're playing 5D chess, okay? Play that out today. And you'd say, he's a genius. You have to play the, okay, he is a genius card out. If he's a genius, this whole thing was a WWF game theory where they all got in a room and said, we're taking down the FANG 20%. Yeah, we're going through with the court cases. We're going to scare the shit out of China because I'm crazy. And when I finally relent, they'll be so happy to come to the table to do they'll be so happy to come to the table to do a 10, 20-year deal instead of like a 2-year deal that will get a great deal. So, hey, if that's the game they're playing and they want to sell that story, go ahead. Because I think people will be thrilled. You know, obviously there'll be other problems with 10-year plans, but most people will be thrilled knowing the rules for the next 10 years so they can go invest accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we could go, because I'm like, is China even that scared? Do you think that China's like that scared?
No.
It doesn't
I
sound
think
like
China
it.
has, if you follow the news, and I do a little bit, they have their own problems, right? The youth unemployment in China is insanely high.
Yeah.
And so
Wait, what do you mean shouldn't youth be unemployed?
I said youth unemployment is like 30, 40%. It's
What
very high there. They're not, like, they have their own economic
youth
problem.
employment or
Unemployment.
Okay, but kids work there? Dumb question.
No, I'm not saying kids, but the young people's
Oh,
unemployment
young.
rate is
Okay,
very high.
I'm thinking youth like 12. So I was like,
No,
that should be way higher.
Yeah. So they have their own problems.
Yeah.
But they have a different culture. So for us to assume we know what's going on there, we don't know. But
Yeah.
they have their own problems.
Well, we shall see. As the world turns, as the WWF turns. Howard, always awesome to see you. Guys, we'll be right back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow to do it all again. Keep tuning in. Love seeing your comments. Hit us up on X in the app. Howard, take it easy. And good luck out there, everyone.
See you.